The soft morning light spilled through the large windows of a cozy cafe in Seoul, painting the wooden tables with a warm golden glow. Sarah Lee's heart fluttered as she stepped inside, adjusting her jacket nervously. Today was her first blind date, a step she had hesitated to take, but curiosity and a quiet hope for something meaningful had pushed her forward. She didn't know who she would meet, only that she wanted someone genuine, someone with kindness at heart, not just charm on the surface. The new dating app, My Love, had promised to match people thoughtfully, and Sarah, cautious but optimistic, had decided to trust the process. Across the room, Mike Kim sat with a casual jacket draped over his shoulders, pretending to be just another person waiting for a coffee. His chest tightened slightly as he glanced at the entrance, his heart thumping in a mixture of anticipation and mild discomfort. He was not here for love, at least not yet. His purpose was professional, to test the new dating app his company, MK Tech, had developed. To make the experiment authentic, he had crafted a simple persona, posing as a humble food delivery worker. The thought made his lips curve in a small, restrained smile, though a nervous energy tingled through his fingers. He was careful, measured, and oddly alive with the thrill of hiding his true identity. Sarah's eyes scanned the cafe, and she immediately spotted him. His appearance was modest, unassuming, and yet there was an air of quiet attentiveness that caught her attention. She approached cautiously, heart palpitating, palms slightly damp with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Hi, I'm Sarah," she said, offering a smile that was both hopeful and tentative. Mike looked up, his own pulse quickening, and responded with a soft, "I'm Mike." He held out a hand, careful not to seem overly rehearsed. The reality of their meeting, the intimacy of a blind date, settled around them, an invisible thread of expectation and possibility. He felt a flutter in his stomach, a rare crack in his usual composure. Their first awkward moments were quickly intensified when Sarah, balancing her coffee and a notebook, accidentally tipped the cup onto Mike's lap. Warm liquid soaked through his jeans, and a soft gasp escaped her lips. "Oh my God. I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, fumbling with napkins and trying to mop up the mess. Her chest tightened, and a nervous blush colored her cheeks. Her heart raced not just from embarrassment, but from the startling proximity to the stranger she was meant to get to know today. Mike laughed softly, a sound edged with warmth and surprise, and crouched to help her pick up the fallen papers. "It's okay, really," he said, trying to mask the sudden jolt of amusement and curiosity he felt. His hands brushed against hers, sending a brief shiver up his spine. As the papers tumbled around them, Sarah couldn't help laughing at the clumsiness, and something about that laughter made Mike's chest ache with an unexpected tenderness. "I hope you don't always spill coffee on people you meet for the first time," Mike teased lightly, his voice trembling slightly with a mix of nerves and amusement. Sarah laughed, a sound that felt bright and easy in the cozy cafe atmosphere. "Only when fate decides to introduce me to someone interesting," she replied, her brown eyes sparkling with humor and subtle sincerity. As they sat down, Sarah's conversation wandered naturally to her opinions about life and the people she had encountered. She expressed her distaste for ostentatious lifestyles, her voice warm yet firm. "I just don't understand people who flaunt everything," she said, her eyes earnest. "It feels empty. I admire simplicity, honesty. Those are the things that really matter." Mike felt a strange pull in his chest, an unfamiliar tug that went beyond mere curiosity. He had built his life around wealth, strategy, and control, yet here was someone who valued the unadorned truths he had long hidden from the world. "I couldn't agree more," he said softly, careful to maintain the humble facade. Beneath the modesty, though, his heart beat wildly, a mixture of admiration and something like longing. He realized, almost painfully, that he was already emotionally invested, despite knowing he had only come to test the app. Their conversation meandered from childhood memories to favorite books, each topic revealing glimpses of the real person behind the mask. Every laugh, every pause, every glance deepened their connection. When their hands brushed while reaching for the same napkin, a spark shot through both of them. Sarah's eyes widened, her cheeks flushed, and Mike felt a jolt of warmth spread from his chest to his fingertips. He tried to focus on the conversation, but every nerve seemed attuned to her presence, every beat of his heart resonating with her laughter. "Do you always have this a charm, even when coffee is spilled on you?" Sarah asked, teasing gently. Mike smiled, the blush rising faintly on his cheeks. "Only when I meet someone who makes it hard to pretend I'm indifferent," he replied, the words slipping out before he could censor them. His pulse hammered as he realized how much of his true self was quietly revealing itself, despite his careful disguise. By the time they left the cafe, the awkwardness of the first meeting had transformed into a fragile, shimmering bond. Sarah walked with a hopeful light in her eyes, feeling the possibility of connection, of someone who might truly understand her. Mike, on the other hand, felt the sharp tug of guilt and excitement. He'd intended to test the app, to observe and report, yet he found himself deeply, unexpectedly drawn to her honesty, her warmth, and her unassuming charm. As they parted ways, each felt a flutter of anticipation, a delicate tension of what might come next. For Sarah, it was the promise of finding someone genuine. For Mike, it was the dangerous thrill of a connection he could not yet fully admit, even to himself. And in that quiet, fleeting moment, something tender and profound had begun, a bond that neither had anticipated, a spark that would ignite a journey neither could foresee. The next afternoon, the city of Seoul seemed alive with the soft rhythm of falling rain. Sarah had left her umbrella at home in her rush to meet Mike again. The sky was a muted gray, and each droplet that kissed her skin made her shiver slightly. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling a cold knot in her stomach, not just from the rain, but from the anticipation of seeing him again. Their last encounter lingered in her mind, replaying the gentle awkwardness, the laughter, the fleeting warmth of his touch. She wondered if this meeting would feel just as magical, or if the reality of a second encounter would dull the spark she felt. Mike, walking briskly through the drizzle, spotted her almost immediately. She looked delicate under the rain, her hair clinging slightly to her cheeks, her expression a mix of discomfort and determination. Without a second thought, he removed his jacket and rushed toward her. "Here, take this," he called, draping it over her shoulders. Sarah gasped, startled by the sudden intimacy and the warmth of the coat against her wet clothes. Her eyes met his wide and shining, and she felt her pulse spike, a fluttering in her chest like 1,000 tiny wings. "You didn't have to," she began, her voice a soft tremor, but the words caught in her throat. Mike's own heartbeat thumped loudly, each beat echoing the ache of unexpected emotion swelling within him. He forced a casual tone, hiding the electricity that surged through his veins. "I couldn't let you get soaked. You'd catch a cold, and I couldn't forgive myself," he said, trying to sound light, but his eyes betrayed him, dark, sincere, and intent. Every small movement, every brush of their shoulders as they shared the narrow shelter of his jacket, made him acutely aware of the closeness, of the delicate boundaries dissolving between them. Sarah laughed nervously, the sound bright but tinged with shyness. Her chest fluttered, warmth spreading through her body despite the chill of the rain. "You really go out of your way for strangers, don't you?" she teased, her words light but her gaze lingering. Mike's lips curved in a small, almost shy smile. "Not strangers, just when I think they might be extraordinary," he replied softly, a hint of his true self slipping through the carefully constructed mask. They walked together under the shelter of a large tree, the rain forming a curtain around them, isolating the world. Every drop that fell on the leaves above created a soft percussion, echoing the quickened rhythm of their hearts. Sarah felt her stomach twist, a mixture of nervousness and a thrill she couldn't name. She kept glancing at him, at the way his hair clung slightly damp to his forehead, the intensity in his dark eyes, the subtle curve of his lips as he tried not to smile too widely. Her hands, half hidden in the folds of the jacket, trembled slightly. "You seem different today," she murmured after a pause, her voice barely audible over the rain. Mike tilted his head, curious. "Different how?" he asked gently. You care," she said, hesitating, almost afraid to speak aloud what she felt. "Most people just pass by, ignore, or pretend. But you notice. You actually try to help." Her words were soft, yet they landed heavily in Mike's chest, making him swallow hard, a lump forming in his throat. He felt a wave of vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to experience. Mike took a small, deliberate step closer, careful not to overwhelm her. "Maybe I just want you to like who I seem to be," he whispered, the confession barely audible over the rain, yet laden with unspoken truth. His chest tightened painfully as he realized he was already falling, not for the persona he had created, but for Sarah herself, for her laughter, her sincerity, her small, unguarded moments of humanity. Sarah's breath hitched, her cheeks warming, eyes glistening with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper, something almost like hope. Her heart pounded fiercely, a thrilling, slightly terrifying rhythm that mirrored his own. "I think I'm already starting to," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling with honesty. Every nerve in her body seemed alive, every raindrop a reminder of the electric closeness that pulled them together. For a few suspended moments, they simply walked side by side, sharing the small space of his coat. The air was thick with anticipation, a fragile tension mingling with warmth and comfort. The rhythm of the rain, the closeness of their bodies, the unspoken understanding between them created a private world where time seemed suspended. Mike felt a shiver run down his spine, a mixture of fear and exhilaration, knowing the truth of his life. The wealthy, powerful CEO was hidden, yet feeling unable to hide the emotions he couldn't control. I like seeing this side of you, Sarah admitted after a moment, her voice soft, a whisper almost meant for herself. Mike turned toward her, his dark eyes meeting hers, a subtle ache in his chest. And I like how you see me, he said, truth threading delicately through the lie. Every heartbeat echoed the connection. Every breath carried the weight of the unspoken, and every step in the rain drew them closer in ways neither fully understood. They finally reached the small park where Sarah had intended to linger for a moment despite the rain. She paused, her hands gripping the coat, her fingers brushing his lightly, a small shock of warmth traveling from the contact to her chest. Mike noticed the tremor in her hands and smiled gently, offering reassurance without words. They stood together, droplets sliding down their faces, hearts racing, silently acknowledging that something extraordinary was unfolding between them, a fragile, intoxicating spark that neither had anticipated, yet neither could deny. As the rain eased and the first light of the evening sun peeked through the clouds, Mike knew the experiment with the app had already surpassed professional curiosity. Something unplanned, authentic, and breathtakingly real was happening. And Sarah, though unaware of the secret he still carried, felt a strange, fluttering hope, a sense that perhaps this blind date, conceived through technology and caution, might just lead to something profoundly human, a connection born of laughter, care, and a shared, tender vulnerability. The following week brought a mixture of excitement and unease for Sarah as she walked into MK Tech for her first official day as a receptionist. The lobby buzzed with energy, phones ringing, heels clicking against the marble floors, employees moving briskly through the halls. Her chest tightened with nervous anticipation. Each breath felt shallow, her palms damp as she gripped her bag. This was a place of efficiency and innovation, a world far removed from the cozy cafe where she had met Mike. Yet, beneath the professionalism, she carried a faint, lingering curiosity about him, a spark she couldn't entirely explain. Mike, hidden among the glass-walled offices on the upper floors, watched her from afar. The sight of Sarah navigating the corporate maze with grace and composure stirred a complex ache in his chest. His pulse quickened, a mixture of pride, longing, and the sharp sting of guilt. He reminded himself constantly that he couldn't reveal his identity yet, that this was still an experiment. But every step she took, every small smile she offered to a colleague, made it harder to maintain the facade. His fingers flexed slightly at his sides, unconsciously mimicking the tension in his chest. The sight of her brought warmth to his chest, even as his stomach twisted with anxiety. Sarah approached the reception desk with a determined smile, trying to mask her nervousness. She greeted colleagues politely, her voice firm yet friendly, each word spoken with the subtle confidence of someone aware of her own worth, but still navigating unfamiliar territory. Every interaction made her heart flutter slightly. She was aware of being watched, not knowing it was Mike, and yet the feeling was strangely comforting, almost as if she sensed an unseen protector in the building. Meanwhile, Mike's older brother, Phil, noticed the subtle shift in Mike's demeanor. "You've got that look again," Phil teased lightly during a meeting, a knowing smile tugging at his lips. Mike felt his stomach knot, a cold sweat prickling at his temples. "What look?" he asked, trying to sound nonchalant, though his fingers tapped nervously against the conference table. Phil's sharp eyes twinkled with mischief. "You know, the one you get when someone walks into your life and makes your brain stop functioning for a second." Mike chuckled awkwardly, hiding the truth behind a veneer of professionalism. He couldn't let Phil know, he couldn't allow anyone to see the depth of his feelings for Sarah, especially not when the stakes were so high. Their father's expectations loomed large, an invisible weight pressing down on every choice Mike made. Love with a receptionist, someone outside the world of elite social circles, was unthinkable in his family's eyes. Every glance he stole at Sarah, every small smile he caught her giving to others, made him more certain that he couldn't stay detached any longer, but fear and duty wrestled with desire in every heartbeat. Sarah, meanwhile, was unaware of the silent observer. She immersed herself in the tasks of the day, answering calls, directing visitors, and learning the intricate systems of MK Tech. But a faint, inexplicable feeling lingered, a flutter in her chest when she glanced up and felt as though someone were watching her. Her mind wandered briefly to the cafe, to Mike, and to the warmth that had unexpectedly entered her life. Her cheeks warmed at the memory of his quiet attentiveness, the gentle humor that had made her laugh, and the subtle connection that had seemed to ignite instantly between them. She shook her head slightly, trying to focus, but the memory remained, stubborn and bright in her mind. As the day progressed, Mike's presence became a quiet tension in the building. He found small opportunities to observe her. A fleeting glance as she helped a nervous visitor, a soft laugh at a colleague's joke, the determined way she corrected a technical error with grace. Each moment made his chest ache with the dual weight of longing and restraint. He wanted to approach her to confirm the connection they had begun to build, yet he knew any direct interaction risked exposing his secret. Phil, ever perceptive, continued to tease, sensing his brother's growing infatuation. "Careful, little brother," he said one afternoon, leaning casually against the doorway. "You're practically glowing when she's around." Mike felt a rush of heat to his cheeks, a combination of embarrassment and the undeniable truth in Phil's words. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. His hands fidgeted slightly, betraying the calm facade he tried to maintain. The tension between desire and duty weighed heavily on Mike. He remembered the cafe, the spilled coffee, the laughter, the shared vulnerability, and how it had made him feel alive in a way the boardroom never could. The memory brought a knot of longing to his stomach, a tight ache that matched the rhythm of his racing heart. Every time Sarah smiled, every time she moved with quiet grace, he felt the pull of connection, the irresistible urge to be near her, yet he remained hidden, a silent guardian from the shadows. Sarah, sensing a subtle energy she couldn't explain, continued her work with quiet determination. She found herself smiling unexpectedly at small thoughts of him, replaying fragments of their conversations and the fleeting touches they had shared. Her heart fluttered in a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She didn't know his secret, didn't realize that the man she was curious about was the same person who controlled the building she now worked in, and yet the magnetic pull of connection was undeniable. As the day drew to a close, Mike watched her gather her belongings, a small sigh escaping him. He wanted to approach, to speak, to let her know she mattered, but fear of discovery and the looming weight of family expectations held him back. His chest ached with longing, and a cold sweat dotted his forehead as he realized he was no longer merely testing an app. He was falling deeply, irreversibly, for a woman who unknowingly occupied both his heart and his professional world. Walking away from the lobby, Mike's thoughts swirled in a tempest of desire, caution, and Sarah, unaware of the storm she had stirred in his life, left with a gentle smile, carrying a growing sense of anticipation for what might come next. The bond between them had begun to stretch, fragile yet undeniable, suspended between the unknown, the unspoken, and the inevitable truth that their lives were now intricately intertwined. That night, Mike sat alone in his office, staring at the ceiling, heart racing, mind filled with images of Sarah's laughter, her earnest eyes, her small, unguarded gestures. For the first time, he realized that love, raw, unfiltered, and deeply human, was no longer just an experiment. It was a force that had taken hold of him entirely, one that he couldn't control, ignore, or hide forever. And in that realization, a quiet determination formed. He would protect this connection, no matter the obstacles, no matter the risks. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, enclosing Mike and Sarah in the small mirrored space. The fluorescent light reflected off the polished walls, casting faint shadows that seemed to heighten the tension between them. Mike's chest tightened, his heart hammering, as he realized how close they stood. Sarah's eyes, wide and curious, met his, and a small shiver ran through her spine, a mixture of anticipation and something undefinable, a flutter in her stomach that made her fingers tighten around her bag strap. I didn't expect to see you here," Sarah said softly, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. She shifted slightly, the motion brushing her shoulder against his. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through Mike, a warmth he couldn't disguise. I just got a temporary role here," he said carefully, keeping his voice low, measured. "Helping out in the IT department. You know, basic stuff." He forced a smile, trying to appear casual while his chest throbbed with tension. Each word was a careful construction, a partial truth to cover the reality he couldn't yet reveal. His palms were slightly sweaty, fingers flexing nervously at his sides, and he felt a subtle tremor in his stomach as he watched her reaction. Sarah's eyes lit up, a soft smile forming on her lips. "Wow, that's great. I mean, it's nice to see you again, even if you're just helping out in IT, she said, her voice warm, yet tinged with curiosity. Her heart fluttered, a delicate knot of hope and apprehension, because she sensed he was hiding something, yet didn't know what. The tension in the elevator felt almost electric, a private world where only they existed for a fleeting moment. Mike swallowed hard, the knot in his throat tightening. I'm glad you're happy, he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet sincerity. He wanted to tell her everything, the truth about the company, about the app, about himself, but the risk was too great. Instead, he chose to reveal only a fragment, hoping she would trust the man beneath the humble guise. He could feel the pull of her gaze, the warmth in her eyes, and it made him ache with both longing and restraint. When the elevator doors opened, the world outside felt suddenly louder, harsher, yet Mike and Sarah stepped into it together, their sides brushing ever so slightly. He walked with her toward the small, elegant bistro she had suggested for lunch, the soft drizzle from the rain earlier still lingering in the air. Every step made his pulse quicken, every subtle movement of hers, how she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the way her eyes brightened when she laughed, sent tiny electric shocks through him. Over lunch, their conversation flowed with an ease that surprised them both. Sarah spoke of her new role, her hopes, and her small triumphs, each word carrying the subtle cadence of someone who had endured, grown, and persevered. Mike listened, utterly captivated, his chest swelling with admiration and a quiet ache of affection. His fingers brushed against hers occasionally as they reached for utensils, each contact sending shivers up his spine. At one point, Sarah paused mid-sentence, her eyes narrowing slightly, a subtle frown creasing her brow. Mike, is there something you're not telling me? She asked gently, curiosity and intuition mingling in her voice. Her heart beat rapidly, a fluttering sensation in her chest, as if sensing the walls he had built around himself. Mike's throat tightened, the familiar knot of tension settling deeper. He exhaled slowly, trying to appear casual, though his pulse raced and a fine sheen of sweat prickled at his temples. I'm testing the My Love app, he admitted, careful to avoid the revelation of his true identity. I wanted to see if it worked in real life, see how people reacted, how connections formed. That's why I created this humble persona. His voice carried a mixture of vulnerability and controlled honesty, each word weighed carefully, each syllable a delicate step on fragile ice. Sarah's eyes widened slightly, a complex swirl of surprise, curiosity, and faint disappointment reflecting in her gaze. Her stomach fluttered, a subtle ache mingling with the warmth in her chest. So, all this time, you were testing me? She asked, the question soft but heavy, as if testing the line between deception and sincerity. Mike reached out, hesitating for a heartbeat before letting his hand brush hers. I didn't expect to feel like this, he confessed, his voice almost a whisper. It started as just a test, but then it became real. You are real, Sarah. And I care. More than I thought I could. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers for understanding, vulnerability spilling out through the carefully maintained mask. His heart pounded, a relentless rhythm, his stomach twisting with anticipation and fear. Sarah felt the warmth of his words, the sincerity and the tremor of his voice. Her own heart raced, a delicate storm of hope, skepticism, and longing. She wanted to believe him, to trust the man sitting across from her, but the lingering thought of deception cast a shadow over her feelings. Her chest tightened, a subtle ache in her ribs, a soft flutter in her stomach as she weighed her emotions against the faint sting of betrayal. I don't know what to say, she admitted, her voice quivering slightly, eyes glistening with the unshed weight of emotion. It's a lot, and I don't know, torn. But I do know, I like you, and I feel like you care about me. But it's confusing. Her words hung between them, heavy and fragile, yet brimming with a tentative honesty that made Mike's chest ache with longing and admiration. Mike leaned slightly forward, his voice soft and steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. I understand, and I don't expect you to believe me right away. I wanted you to know the truth I could give. The rest, I'll earn your trust. His gaze held hers, dark and unyielding, yet filled with a tenderness that seemed to reach deep into her chest, stirring warmth and quiet hope. For the remainder of the lunch, they spoke in quieter tones, sharing fragments of their lives, their fears, and their small vulnerabilities. Every glance, every smile, every brush of fingers across the table deepened the fragile thread connecting them. Sarah felt her heart soften, the tension between curiosity and caution blending with a growing, undeniable attraction. Mike felt the thrill and ache of closeness, every heartbeat echoing the weight of a connection that had begun as a professional experiment but was transforming into something profoundly human, intimate, and real. By the time they parted, the rain had ceased, leaving the streets shimmering under the soft glow of streetlights. Sarah walked away with a gentle smile, a fluttering in her chest, a warmth that lingered long after the physical distance between them. Mike watched her go, his chest tight with longing and anticipation, knowing that the partial confession had changed something fundamental between them. He realized, painfully and beautifully, that he no longer sought just to test the app. He sought to nurture, protect, and explore the fragile, tender bond that had formed with Sarah, a bond rooted in honesty, vulnerability, and the quiet thrill of discovering someone extraordinary. The morning sun filtered weakly through the glass walls of MK Tech, casting long, cold shadows across the sleek office floors. Sarah arrived, unaware that today would shatter the fragile trust and delicate bond she had begun to form with Mike. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her bag strap, a subtle flutter in her chest reminding her the moments they had shared, the laughter, the closeness, the vulnerability. She hadn't expected that the next step in her day would feel like stepping into a storm she could neither anticipate nor control. Mike, in his office high above the lobby, watched her as she moved with quiet efficiency. His chest tightened, a knot of anticipation and dread forming as he noticed her alert eyes scanning the floor, attentive to her surroundings. He had always known this day might come, the moment when the truth of his identity could no longer remain hidden. His stomach twisted, and a cold sweat prickled at his temples as he realized that the carefully constructed line between their worlds was about to break. It happened with a casual phone call from a colleague, brief mention of a meeting with the CEO. Sarah, ever curious and eager to understand the inner workings of her new workplace, wandered into the corridor leading to the executive offices. She paused outside the door, noticing Mike's familiar figure seated behind a massive mahogany desk, his posture relaxed, but his expression unreadable. The realization hit her like a cold wave. This was the same man she had believed to be a humble IT helper, a simple persona she had come to trust, laugh with, and confide in. Her breath caught in her throat, her hands clenching instinctively at her sides, nails pressing into her palms. Mike noticed her hesitation, her wide eyes, and the subtle tremor in her shoulders. His own chest constricted, a piercing ache mingling with fear and regret. "Sarah," he began softly, rising from his chair, but the words felt inadequate against the weight of what she was seeing. His voice carried the tremor of vulnerability he had rarely allowed himself to reveal. "Mike, you're the CEO?" Her voice quivered, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and hurt. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy with emotion, vibrating through the sleek office walls. Her stomach twisted painfully, a mix of betrayal and confusion swirling with the faint ache of longing she had felt for him. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and a lump formed in her throat, making it difficult to breathe. Mike's chest tightened further, guilt and love warring in each heartbeat. He stepped closer, careful not to overwhelm her, his own hands trembling slightly. I didn't mean to deceive you, Sarah," he confessed, his voice a bare whisper, laden with raw honesty. "I only wanted to test the app, and I never expected to feel this way. I fell for you truly, completely." His heart pounded violently, each beat echoing the intensity of the confession. His stomach twisted, his palms damp, as he waited for a reaction he feared he would never receive. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, the sting of humiliation cutting deep into her chest. Her hands shook, clenching into fists at her sides as she struggled to reconcile the man she trusted with the truth now revealed. "You lied to me." Every word, every gesture, her voice cracked, a tremor of anguish threading through her words. Was any of it real? The question hovered painfully, fragile yet potent, striking the delicate bond they had nurtured. Mike's breath hitched, a wave of helplessness washing over him. He reached out, almost instinctively, his fingers trembling as they hovered near her shoulder. "It was real, Sarah. Every moment, every laugh, every touch, I mean it. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how else to find someone genuine, someone who wasn't blinded by wealth. I didn't expect to fall for you. I never imagined this would happen." His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers desperately, pleading for understanding. His chest heaved with emotion, and a tight knot of guilt formed in his throat, making his words even heavier. Sarah took a step back, her body stiff with the shock of revelation. Her chest heaved, the tears now streaming freely down her cheeks. Her heart ached, not just with betrayal, but with the bitter sting of realizing that the man she had begun to trust had hidden the most fundamental truth from her. Her hands pressed against her chest, as if trying to steady the whirlwind of emotion tearing through her. How could you do this? I trusted you, Mike. I let myself feel. I let myself hope. Her voice wavered, raw and fragile, carrying the weight of hurt and the faint echo of love. Mike felt the pain in her words pierce him, each syllable a dagger to his chest. His own chest tightened painfully, lump forming in his throat as he swallowed hard. He wanted to explain, to make her see the depth of his sincerity, the truth behind the deception, but he knew that words alone might never bridge the chasm between them. Sarah, I understand if you never forgive me. I understand if you can't trust me again. I only hope. I hope you can see that my feelings for you are real. It's real. His hands, trembling slightly, reached out again, tentative, yearning for even a fraction of the connection they had once shared. The room fell into a tense silence, broken only by the soft hum of the office beyond. Sarah's mind raced, her emotions a turbulent storm. Her chest tightened, a fluttering in her stomach mingling with tears, with disbelief, with a faint glimmer of lingering affection. She had felt the connection, the bond, the subtle warmth of shared moments, but now it was clouded by the weight of betrayal. Her legs felt weak, and she sank slightly onto a nearby chair, hands pressed to her face, the tears spilling unchecked. Mike knelt beside her, careful not to crowd her space, his eyes dark with earnestness. I never wanted to deceive you out of malice. I only wanted to find someone who sees people, not wealth. And when I met you, it wasn't a test anymore. You became everything I hadn't realized I was missing. His voice broke slightly, thick with emotion, and his hand hovered near hers, almost touching, trembling with vulnerability. Sarah's tears continued to fall, her body tense, her heart a chaotic rhythm of pain and yearning. She didn't know what to believe anymore. The hurt of deception clashed violently with the memories of laughter, warmth, and genuine connection. Her chest tightened, the ache radiating through her ribs, a storm of emotions she struggled to control. She looked at Mike, his dark eyes glistening with vulnerability and sincerity, and felt a flicker of something she hadn't expected, hope. A fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, the bond they had shared could survive the revelation, could grow stronger despite the pain. For a long moment, they sat in silence, the air thick with emotion. Mike's presence, the vulnerability in his posture, the ache in his voice, all of it reached her, touching something deep and tender within her. Her own heart, still pounding, still aching, began to respond, not fully trusting, not yet forgiving, but acknowledging the reality of the feelings that had grown between them. A soft shiver ran through her, a fluttering warmth mingling with tears, as she realized that the connection they shared was undeniable, fragile, and beautiful, even in the shadow of betrayal. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling like she hadn't slept at all. Her pillow was damp from tears, and her head felt heavy. She dragged herself out of bed, dressed in silence, and took a deep breath before heading to work. Every step toward MK Tech felt like walking toward an unavoidable storm. When she arrived, she kept her head down, greeting no one except with polite nods. Her chest tightened when she entered the lobby. Mike wasn't there. A small part of her was relieved, but an even bigger part ached with disappointment. Around lunchtime, as Sarah sat at her desk, the glass doors slid open. Mike walked in. Not as the CEO, not as the man who commanded rooms, but as someone strangely unsure of himself. He was holding something. Hi, he said softly, almost timidly, standing near her desk. Sarah glanced up, her expression unreadable. What do you want, Mike? Her voice was calm, but there was a quiet strength in it. Mike took a deep breath and held out a paper bag. I brought you lunch. It's from that little restaurant you said you loved. The one near your apartment. Bibimbap with extra kimchi, just how you like it. Sarah stared at the bag, then back at him. You think lunch fixes everything? No, he said quickly, shaking his head. I don't think anything can fix this in a day. But I needed to do something, even if it's small, to show you that I care. Sarah hesitated, then took the bag without saying a word. She opened it, and the smell of warm food filled the air. Her stomach grumbled involuntarily. She hadn't eaten breakfast. Mike sat down on the edge of her desk, carefully, like he was afraid of being too close. I know I lied, he said quietly. I know I broke something between us. But Sarah, I didn't lie because I wanted to hurt you. I lied because I didn't know how to be Mike, just Mike, without the company, without the title. Sarah put the chopsticks down and looked at him, her throat tight. Do you even hear yourself? You had the privilege to choose who to be. I didn't. I don't get to hide my life behind anything. What you did, it made me feel like I was a joke to you. Like I was part of some experiment. Mike's shoulders slumped. You weren't a joke. Not for a second. You were the only real thing in my life these past weeks. Her eyes burned. Then why didn't you just tell me the truth? Because I was scared, he admitted, his voice breaking. Scared that you'd see me as just another CEO with too much money and not enough time for real things. Scared you'd never laugh with me the way you did that first night if you knew who I was. The silence between them stretched. Sarah looked down, fighting the lump in her throat. For a brief moment, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes, the same boyish smile she had fallen for. Then, as if on cue, Mike's phone buzzed. He fumbled to silence it, but accidentally dropped it. It slid across the floor and hit the leg of her chair. Sarah couldn't help it, she laughed. It was small, soft, but it broke the tension like sunlight breaking through clouds. Mike blinked, then grinned sheepishly. Wow, that was smooth. Sarah wiped the corner of her eye. You're ridiculous. Yeah, he said, smiling wider. But I'm your ridiculous, or at least I'm trying to be. For the first time since the truth had come out, Sarah felt her anger loosen, just a little. Not gone, but not as sharp. Mike noticed it too. Can I try again? Not with the lying, not with the secrets. Just try again as me. No titles. No games. Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding. She wanted to say no to keep her guard up. But she also remembered the way he held the umbrella over her in the rain, the way he listened to her dreams, the way he made her feel seen. Just don't mess it up again, she said finally. Mike's entire face lit up. Deal. He left shortly after, giving her space. But Sarah sat there, staring at the empty lunchbox and feeling something unexpected, hope. That night, as she walked home, she caught herself smiling at the memory of his awkward apology. Maybe, just maybe, she thought some things were worth forgiving. Sarah had been replaying their conversation all week. Mike's clumsy apology, his quiet vulnerability, it had chipped away at her anger. Not completely, but enough for her to notice that her chest didn't feel as heavy when she saw him at work. Still, she kept her distance. It wasn't easy. Mike seemed to be everywhere, stepping out of elevators when she was heading in, holding doors open for her, leaving coffee on her desk with little notes that read things like, for the hardest working person at MK Tech. By Friday, Sarah's walls were thinner than she wanted to admit. That evening, as most of the office cleared out, Sarah stayed late to finish some reports. The building was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers. She heard footsteps behind her, slow, hesitant. Hey, Mike said softly. She didn't turn around right away. You know, you really shouldn't keep sneaking up on me like this. It's not good for my heart. Mike smiled faintly and walked around a stand where she could see him. He wasn't wearing his usual suit jacket, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, looking more like the man she'd met in that tiny cafe than the CEO of a tech giant. I'm not here to sneak, he said gently. I'm here to talk. Really talk. Sarah put her pen down and leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. About what? Mike pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. For a moment, he didn't say anything. Just looked at her, his expression raw, unguarded. I grew up in a house where emotions weren't exactly welcome, he started. My father believes that feelings are a distraction, something that gets in the way of building a business. So I learned to hide them. To put on a face and be perfect all the time. Sarah felt her throat tighten. There was something about the way he said it, like a confession that had been sitting in his chest for years. But then I met you, he continued, his voice softer now. And for the first time, I didn't want to hide anything. You laughed at my dumb jokes. You listened to me like what I said actually mattered. And I wanted to tell you everything. I really did. I just didn't know how to do it without losing that magic we had. Sarah swallowed hard. You still should have told me. You should have trusted me enough to let me decide whether I could handle the truth. I know, he said quickly, nodding. And I hate myself for not doing that. But I need you to know, Sarah, I wasn't testing you. I wasn't playing with you. I was just A guy who didn't know if anyone could like him without the fancy title or the money. Her chest ached. She looked down at her hands, feeling that familiar knot in her stomach. You know what I wanted, Mike? I just wanted someone who saw me. Not my past, not my bank account, not my job title. Just me. Mike reached across the table and gently took her hand. I do see you. I see the girl who's been strong for too long. The one who still finds reasons to smile even when life hasn't been fair. I see the woman who makes me want to be better, not as a CEO, not as some perfect version of myself, but as a man. Her eyes stung. She blinked quickly, but a tear escaped anyway. You're so annoying, she whispered, half laughing, half crying. Mike smiled. Annoying enough to ask for another chance? Before she could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the office. They both turned as someone entered, a tall man in an expensive suit. Mike, the man said sharply. What is this? Sarah froze. She had seen him in the building before, but never spoken to him. Phil, Mike said, standing up slowly. This is Sarah? Phil's jaw tightened. The receptionist? He looked at Sarah, then back at Mike. You're kidding me. You're really dating her. Sarah felt her stomach drop. The way he said the receptionist made it sound like an insult. Mike stepped closer to his brother, his voice calm but firm. Yes, and I don't appreciate the tone. Phil let out a sharp laugh. Mike, come on. This is exactly why Dad is worried about you. You're supposed to be focusing on the company, not playing house with. Stop. Mike's voice cut through the room like a blade. Phil stared at him, shocked. This is not your decision, Mike said, his tone steady but filled with quiet power. And it's not Dad's either. I know what I'm doing. Sarah matters to me. That's not going to change. Sarah's heart was racing. She had never seen Mike like this, standing so firm, so unshakable. Phil sighed, shaking his head. Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you when this blows up in your face. He turned and walked out, leaving the office in heavy silence. Mike turned back to Sarah, his chest rising and falling. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. Sarah wiped her eyes and shook her head. No, don't be. You really stood up for me. Mike stepped closer, his hand brushing hers again. I'll stand up for you every single time. This time, Sarah didn't pull away. She let him hold her hand. And in that quiet office, under the hum of the lights, something between them shifted. Maybe this was what trust felt like. The next morning, Mike barely had time to breathe before he was summoned to his father's office. It wasn't unusual for Mr. Kim to call meetings early, but there was a heaviness in the way his assistant said, "He wants to see you." Now, Mike walked into the office and found his father standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back, staring down at the city as if he owned every building in sight. You wanted to see me? Mike asked carefully. His father turned, his expression unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Sit. Mike obeyed, his palms suddenly sweating. I heard about your little situation. Mr. Kim began, his tone cool. Phil told me everything. You're seeing the receptionist. Mike clenched his jaw, but kept his voice calm. Yes, her name is Sarah. And yes, I'm seeing her. Mr. Kim's brows furrowed. This is unacceptable. You are the CEO of this company. Your decisions reflect on the family name. Do you have any idea what people will say when they find out that Kim Air is dating an employee, a receptionist? Mike's heart pounded. I don't care what people say. I care about Sarah. She makes me happy. Isn't that what matters? His father's face hardened. Happiness is a luxury, not a priority. You have a responsibility to this company, to our legacy. We built MK Tech from nothing, and you would risk all of that for feelings. Mike stood, his chest heaving. I'm not risking the company, Father. I'm risking myself. Because living a life where I have to pretend I don't love someone just to make you proud, that's not a life I want. For the first time, Mr. Kim's voice rose. If you choose this girl over the company, you will lose everything. Your position, your inheritance, your future here. Mike's heart hammered in his ears, but he didn't flinch. Then I'll walk away. If it comes down to choosing between the company and Sarah, I choose Sarah. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Kim's face turned red, his hands gripping the back of his chair until his knuckles whitened. You are a fool, he said finally, his voice low and dangerous. Maybe, Mike replied, his voice breaking just slightly. But at least I'll be a fool who's free. He turned and walked out before his father could say another word. When Sarah heard what had happened, her breath caught. You walked away from the company? Mike nodded, running a hand through his hair. He looked exhausted, like the weight of the world had been sitting on his shoulders. I had to. I couldn't let him think he could control who I love. Sarah's heart ached. She wanted to be angry, to tell him that this was too much, that she never asked him to give up everything for her, but instead she felt tears sting her eyes. You didn't have to do that for me, she whispered. Yes, I did, he said softly, stepping closer. Because this isn't just about us anymore. It's about me finally living the life I want, not the one my father scripted for me. Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tight. Mike, this could destroy your relationship with your family. Mike's gaze softened. Then maybe it's time my family learns that love isn't a weakness. Sarah couldn't shake the worry gnawing at her. That night, she arranged to meet Phil. If anyone could convince their father to calm down, it was him. Phil was surprised when she showed up at his office after hours. Sarah, what are you doing here? I need your help, she said quickly. Mike is ready to give up everything because of your father's ultimatum. You know that's not fair. Can't you talk to him? Make him see that this doesn't have to ruin the family. Phil sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. You don't know my father like I do. Once he's made up his mind, that's it. Sarah's heart sank, but then she noticed something. A woman walked out of Phil's private office, smiling nervously. She was young, wearing a plain dress, and Sarah recognized her immediately. Lily, Phil's secretary. Phil's face went pale. Sarah, this isn't what it looks like. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Really? Because it looks like you're in love with your secretary. Phil opened his mouth, then closed it again. Finally, he sighed. Fine. Yes. Lily and we've been seeing each other. But if my father knew. Sarah's eyes widened, and then she smiled, a small, knowing smile. Then maybe it's time you stop hiding too. Phil stared at her for a long moment, then let out a small laugh. You're braver than you look, you know that? Sarah shrugged. Maybe I just know that love is worth fighting for. The next evening, Sarah, Mike, Phil, and Lily sat together at a cafe, a strange alliance forming over steaming cups of tea. We go together, Sarah said firmly. All four of us. We tell your father the truth about everything. About Lily, about me, about the fact that you both deserve to love who you love. Mike nodded, his hand finding Sarah's under the table. He might never forgive us, he said quietly. Phil smirked. Or he might finally remember what it feels like to have heart. There was a long pause, then Mike smiled faintly. Then let's do it. The next morning, the four of them stood outside Mr. Kim's office like soldiers about to march into battle. Sarah's heart thudded so hard it echoed in her ears. Her palms were damp, and she felt a cold shiver run down her back despite the warmth of the building. Mike glanced at her, his jaw set, but his thumb brushed against her hand in a small grounding gesture. We're in this together, his eyes seemed to say. When the assistant finally called them in, Mr. Kim was seated behind his massive desk, a picture of control and authority. His stern gaze moved from Mike to Sarah to Phil, and then to Lily. What is this? His voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm that always came before a storm. Mike spoke first, standing tall. Father, we're here because you need to know the truth. About all of us. Mr. Kim's eyes narrowed. Go on. Phil stepped forward, his shoulders tense. Father, I've been seeing Lily. For a while now. I love her. And I won't pretend otherwise anymore. Mr. Kim's face went pale. What? Lily swallowed hard but spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir, I never meant to disrespect you or the company. But I care about Phil. Truly. Mr. Kim's hands gripped the desk. His breath quickened. Both of my sons. Both of you, lowering yourselves like this. His voice rose. Do you understand what this does to our reputation? To everything I've built. Mike's chest heaved as he stepped closer. Father, listen to yourself. You're so worried about the company that you've forgotten we're human. Phil and I aren't just heirs to MK Tech, we're your sons. We want to live our lives, not just run your empire. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, her throat tight. She spoke for the first time, her voice soft but firm. Mr. Kim, with all due respect, what you've built is incredible. But isn't a family more than a business? Don't you want your sons to be happy? Happy? Mr. Kim's voice cracked, his face flushed with anger. Happiness doesn't build legacies. He stood so suddenly that his chair toppled over. His breathing was labored now, shallow and fast. Mike's stomach twisted. Father. But then Mr. Kim clutched his chest, his face contorting in pain. Dad. Phil shouted, rushing to his side as Mr. Kim collapsed back against the edge of the desk. Everything became chaos. Sarah grabbed her phone and called for help while Mike knelt beside his father, his hands trembling. Stay with me, Dad, Mike pleaded, his voice breaking. Don't you dare leave us like this. Mr. Kim's breathing was ragged, but his grip found Mike's wrist, clutching it tight as if holding on for dear life. The hospital was cold and sterile, the kind of place where time seemed to stretch endlessly. Hours passed, each minute a mix of fear and hope. Sarah sat beside Mike in the waiting room, her hand resting on his knee, grounding him. Mike stared at the floor, his usually perfect posture bent, shoulders heavy with guilt. This is my fault, he said finally, his voice hoarse. No, Sarah whispered, squeezing his knee. You didn't do this. He's been carrying this pressure for years. Maybe this was the moment everything came to the surface. Mike closed his eyes, a single tear slipping down his cheek. What if he doesn't make it? What if the last thing I ever said to him was that I was walking away? Sarah moved closer, wrapping her arms around him. Then you made sure he knew you were willing to fight for the life you believe in. And maybe that's what he needed to hear. Hours later, a doctor came out, his expression calm. He's stable. He had a mild heart attack, but we were able to treat him in time. He's asking for his sons. Mike's knees nearly buckled with relief. He and Phil exchanged a look, then followed the doctor down the hall. Sarah stayed behind with Lily, her heart pounding. Inside the room, Mr. Kim looked frail, his skin pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were open. When he saw his sons, his expression softened in a way Mike had never seen before. Come here, Mr. Kim said quietly. Mike and Phil sat by his bedside. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then Mr. Kim sighed, the sound heavy with years of unspoken emotion. When your mother died, he said slowly, I swore I would do everything to protect this family, to make sure you never suffered. I thought, if I built an empire, you'd be safe. You'd never need anything. Mike's throat tightened. We know, Dad, and we're grateful. But we need more than safety. We need the freedom to live, to love. Mr. Kim's eyes glistened. Your mother, she made me a better man. She taught me that love is the only thing that matters in the end. I suppose I forgot that. Phil reached for his father's hand. Then maybe this is your second chance. To remember. Tears filled Mr. Kim's eyes. For the first time, Mike saw not the untouchable CEO, but a man, a father, who had been lonely for too long. He turned to Mike. If Sarah is who you want, then you have my blessing. And you, Phil, if Lily makes you happy, then love her. I won't stand in your way anymore. Mike's chest felt like it might burst. He leaned forward, hugging his father tightly. Thank you, Dad, he whispered, his voice breaking. For the first time in years, the Kim family felt whole again. When Mike stepped out of the hospital room and saw Sarah waiting, he crossed the hallway and pulled her into his arms. He said yes. Mike breathed into her hair. Sarah's heart swelled. Relief washed over her, warm and deep. Then maybe this is our second chance, too. Mike pulled back just enough to look at her, his eyes shining. No, Sarah. This is our first real chance, because now we don't have to hide anymore. And for the first time since this all began, Sarah let herself believe in their future. Weeks passed since the hospital incident, and everything seemed lighter. Mr. Kim had recovered well, and though he still carried himself with the dignity of a man who built an empire, something in him had softened. He smiled more, asked about Sarah when Mike came home, even invited her to family dinners. But Mike had been planning something quietly, something that made his heart race every time he thought about it. On a crisp Friday night, Sarah received a message from Mike. Meet me at the little cafe where we first met. 7 p.m. Don't be late. Her stomach fluttered as she read it. She hadn't been back there since that first night. The spilled coffee, the nervous smiles, the silly lies. She dressed carefully, her heart beating faster with every passing hour. When she arrived, the cafe was empty, but soft string lights glowed across the ceiling and candles flickered on each table. The smell of freshly baked bread and coffee filled the air. Mike stood near the center of the room, wearing a simple shirt, his sleeves rolled up like that very first night. He turned as she entered, his face lighting up. "You did all this," Sarah whispered, taking in the cozy scene. "Every bit of it," Mike said softly, "because this is where it all started. And I want this to be where we start again." He walked over, taking her hands gently. "Sarah, when we met, I was pretending to be someone else. I was too afraid to let you see the real me. But somehow you saw me anyway. You saw past the lies, the title, the money, and you loved the man underneath it all. You taught me that I don't need to hide, that I don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love." Sarah felt her throat tighten, her eyes filling with tears. Mike took a deep breath. "So tonight I want to ask you, not as a CEO, not as someone trying to impress you, but as the man who loves you with everything he has." Then, to Sarah's shock, Mike dropped to one knee and pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a simple, elegant ring that glimmered softly under the candlelight. "Sarah Lee," Mike said, his voice steady but emotional, "will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for every moment I made you doubt me? Will you let me love you, honestly, completely, without fear, for the rest of our lives?" Sarah's heart was pounding, so hard she thought it might leap out of her chest. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she laughed through them, nodding quickly. "Yes," she breathed, her voice breaking. "Yes, Mike. 1,000 times yes." Mike's face lit up with relief and joy as he slid the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a tight embrace. Sarah could feel his heart hammering against her chest, matching her own. When they finally pulled back, Sarah cupped his face in her hands. "You know," she whispered, smiling through her tears, "you didn't need to do all of this for me to say yes." Mike grinned. "Maybe not. But I wanted to remind us both of how far we've come." They spent the rest of the evening laughing, reminiscing about their first date and dreaming about the future. For the first time, there were no secrets between them, no walls left standing. Later, as they walked out of the cafe under the soul night sky, Mike stopped and looked at Sarah with a grin. "You know what I just realized," he said. "What?" "This time you didn't spill your coffee on me." Sarah laughed, swatting his arm. "Don't jinx it." They both laughed until their stomachs hurt, their breath visible in the cool night air, their hands tightly intertwined as if neither wanted to let go ever again. Love had been tested, broken, rebuilt, and now it stood unshakable. Sarah glanced up at the stars and felt a deep, quiet peace settle over her. For the first time in years, her future didn't feel uncertain. It felt beautiful. And as Mike kissed her forehead, she knew this was just the beginning. If you felt touched by Sarah and Mike's journey, their struggles, their courage, and their second chance at love, make sure to follow this channel for more stories that will make your heart race, bring tears to your eyes, and remind you that love is always worth fighting for.